Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our very first in our future series, our Smart Gippsland series. We thank you very much for coming on board today. I hope you appreciate that. This is our first of a 6 series where we're going to spend 2 hours explaining, we're going to spend 6 weeks over 1 hour explaining to you some of the exciting energy things that are happening within the Gippsland area. Today, we are looking at 3 great speakers who are talking about some large-scale renewable energy projects. We have Erin Coldham, the Star of the South project. We have Peter Marriott from the DELBURN Wind Farm and King Arthur from the Gippsland Renewable Energy Park. Now, I'm sure you're all very used to Zoom right now, but for those of you who haven't, this is a webinar, so you can't actually talk backwards and forwards. We're not going to raise hands or anything like that. But if you do have any questions, and we will be taking those questions, please use the Q&A, which is down the bottom. So there's a little section down the bottom there, Q&A. Put your Q&As in. At the end of each speaker, as you can see, we'll have chance for you to ask those questions, and I'll be raising them with the 3 panellists. And then at the end, all of the panellists will be back again. If there's any other burning questions that you have, you can ask them then as well. We will be sending you a recording of this, a link of all this, and we'll also be giving you much more information in the links that come out after the webinar today. Really, we are brushing the surface of what is an exciting industry. Can I also please just acknowledge the sponsors of this event, HELP, who have been fantastic, the Latrobe Valley Authority through the Smart Utilisation Scheme. We've got the Gippsland Community Climate Change Network. I should introduce myself. My name is Darren McGovern from the Climate Change Network. The Power Hub Sustainability Victoria, and our 2 shires, Latrobe City and the Wellington Shire. We are actually broadcasting to you today from the Wedge Entertainment Centre in Sale and spreading out all over Gippsland. So thank you very much. I have also Esther Lloyd here as technical support. If you do have any technical questions, we do have a chat room, so please go into the chat and Esther will get into those questions for you. Ladies and gentlemen, please keep those questions going. During the talk, I'll be collecting those questions that you have and bringing our panellists up. Anyway, without any further talking, it's now time to bring up our first panellist for today, Erin from the Star of the South, who's going to be talking a little bit about her project. We welcome Erin to our proposal. Excellent, Erin. And we'll give you the floor to explain this very exciting project.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Darren, and thank you to everyone who has registered. I can see here through the power of technology, the power of Zoom, we have more than 100 people listening right now. So first I'm going to share my screen. I do have some slides that I'd like to run through about this very exciting project. So we'll get that up and going into the right view. Okay, fantastic. Now, I hope you can all see that. I'm sure that Esther or Darren will jump in and tell me if there's any technical issues. And firstly, I would like to thank the opportunity to speak about this very exciting project that we have in the Star of the South offshore wind project. And particularly thank all of the sponsors, as Darren mentioned, who have pulled this together. I'm really excited every time I get the opportunity to talk about this project, whether it's with people who have heard about it before or who are hearing about it for the first time. It really is a very exciting proposition for Gippsland and part of a really exciting conversation for Gippsland more broadly, which is what this series does aim to achieve, having this conversation around this renewable future that we're looking at and all of these great projects underway. So without any further ado, I'll get into the slides. First, I'm going to talk a little bit. This is usually where I'd ask the audience to put their hands up and tell me how many people have heard about offshore wind, but I won't do that in this circumstance. But I will spend a little bit of time giving an overview of the project, recognising that it might be the first time some people have heard about it. I'll talk a little bit about offshore wind in general, our team, why we're here in Gippsland, why we think Gippsland has one of the best offshore wind resources in Australia, some benefits for the region, and then really an update on how all of our site investigations are going and how our timelines are looking going forward. Okay, so starting with a project overview, Australia's first offshore wind project. Now, some of you might be aware this project has been a concept for quite a while, around, couple of years. It became public 2017 back in Gippsland. I believe there was a roundtable event where our founders announced this project, and really a few things really drove them to look at this offshore wind. One of them being that there's this great resource out in Gippsland which we'll get into, but really the opportunity to really create a new type of product in the renewable energy market, and seeing what was going on overseas with all of the offshore wind projects. And it really started to take off in 2017 over in the UK, and it has been a while for quite a while in those countries, but it was probably the time that we started to see the costs could come down and make this an opportunity for Australia. So we've got a map here which shows the site that we're looking at for this very big offshore wind project, which is just off the coast of Port Albert and McLaughlin's Beach and Woodside. And we're talking about a very big project. So I often say offshore wind, Star of the South, is not your typical wind farm. We are talking about a very large project, up to 2.2 gigawatts of electricity, and enough to power around 18% of the state of Victoria's electricity needs, up to 1.2 million homes. Very, very big project. We currently are in the feasibility phase. So while I say the project has been around for a while, with a large project like this, I'm sure you can imagine there's a lot of investigation work that needs to be done, and a lot of due diligence, which is really that phase that we're in now. We've got very detailed and formal approval processes, and I'll give an update on that later. In terms of our timeframes, we are working towards aiming for first power in 2025 and full power by 2027. So what I would say is that we've got a very dedicated team who are charging ahead despite the current challenges that we're all facing in this global pandemic at the moment. Offshore wind, very quickly as a recap, because I'm sure some of you have seen this graphic before. What we're talking about is wind turbines in the ocean. And I feel like I do have to explain that, because quite often people say, you know, what is an offshore wind farm? It's not a term they've typically heard. So wind turbines in the ocean with offshore substations. We'd have export cables, so those subsea cables coming into shore, where we then have a network, a transmission network, which we've committed to going underground through Gippsland and connecting into the Latrobe Valley. And that's an important point in terms of why we're looking in this area for this important project. A little bit about our team. Now, I love this photo because this is actually one of the last photos that we were able to take in Gippsland. This was back in March. I think it was about the 4th of March, where our team was down there in the main street of Yarram. It's hard to believe now in terms of where we're at with the society and with this shutdown that we're all experiencing. But the reason we were there and so excited was because it was the first time we took our team to look at our office that we are planning to open in Yarram. So just by way of an update, we are looking to have an office there, which will open. We're still charging ahead, as I say, once it's safe for us to come back into the region and have a more localised presence. But essentially that is the team. What we've got sitting behind that is some quite strong investment from a company called Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners, which is a Danish fund, and they are world leaders in offshore wind. So a question I often get asked is, you know, why isn't there an Australian company that's leading this? And what I would say is we're a real mix of Australians and Danish and Europeans. And the beauty of that is having that know-how, that technical know-how of what it takes to build an offshore wind farm, along with the passion from the Victorians and Australians and folk in Gippsland who are looking to employ in terms of what that looks like in our landscape, in our country. So I'm really excited by this team, and we're looking forward to it growing over the coming years. A little bit of context. So Victoria's energy transition, and I'm looking forward to hearing from my fellow speakers on this. I'm sure that they'll have a very similar theme to what I'm going to talk about here. But as I mentioned, we've got a big challenge sort of facing Victoria, and it's not a question of you know, do we need more power? I think absolutely everybody recognises that we're going to need new investment in energy going forward, whether that's generation, whether that's transmission infrastructure. And what we know of Gippsland is that it's been the home of power generation for close to 100 years. And that transmission network that you see on this map here, that strength is one of the best places in the whole country to generate electricity. But when you look at the pipeline of projects that are coming into the grid, a lot of the renewable projects, and you can see on the map here, it's where I've got these coloured dots. So there's not a lot of you know, new sort of projects that are materialising in the Gippsland area. So that's why we believe that it's really important to get that diversity, because you can tap into the grid infrastructure that already exists, importantly tap into the skills. But as I'll talk about on the next slide, you know, why Gippsland? There's a few practical reasons, but really the main one is that we have discovered a very unique resource in the Gippsland region. And the exciting information that we've discovered recently, and we've looked into Bureau of Meteorology studies going back 30 years, is that there's a very unique weather system that comes over the Tasman Sea, over the east of the state, on very hot days. And they are the hot days where demand for electricity is at its highest. And at that same time, when that high pressure system comes through, the wind speeds are really strong in the east of the state. So there's a really important argument about growing a very stable and reliable renewable network, that you need to have diversity in there, in that both geographic diversity, but also diversity in technology. So a mix of solar, onshore wind, offshore wind, other forms of generation, to help get that stable, reliable grid going forward. A few other practical things there, as I mentioned: suitable sea depths, 20 to 40 metres, which we've been able to confirm. And there's a few other key points there which make it a very strong location. Benefits for the region, I have to be very clear, it's not free beer from the Bull Ant Brewery in Bruzen. Really what I love about this photo is it just shows some of the benefits that people don't think materialise from an offshore wind project. And people think about the steel and the concrete and the construction jobs and that sort of investment. But really, as a project team, what we see is the opportunity to revitalise townships by having people there, by having new people come to the area because there's a reason for them to come. This is just an example in East Gippsland, where we bought some beers on the way home from looking at our site investigations. But, you know, as I said, it really is that broader industry development and investment. You can see I've got a couple of minutes left. So site investigations, this is really where we're at the moment. There's a few pictures there. That's our floating LiDAR buoys off the coast, which we launched in November. And I'm really happy to say that the 5 months of data we've collected from those pieces of equipment are very promising, very strong wind speeds in line with our expectations. I've got a plane there. We're doing our aerial bird and marine mammal surveys at the moment, so that work is ongoing. We've had a few challenges through this COVID-19 pandemic, but we are managing to overcome those issues. And our vessel there. So again, another good update is the sea conditions are as expected. No real showstoppers in terms of conditions under the sea that we're concerned about at this point. Just 2 more slides left. So the progress and timeline for our project, as mentioned, we have started our site investigations. So that started back in November last year. And most recently, we have referred the project to both the state government and the federal government to get their view on the types of approval and assessment pathways that this project needs. So there's a lot of debate going on about ongoing legislation for offshore clean energy, and I'm really happy to say that we've been participating in that. But equally, there's some state processes that we need to go through at the same time. Finally, this is the last slide. I wanted to highlight, particularly for the Gippsland audience that are logged on today, is that we have a community and landowner consultation process underway right now. So essentially, we have released some information to the community, and if you live in Gippsland, hopefully you've received one of our newsletters. We did send them out to 50,000 households, and proud to say printed in Gippsland, in Morwell there. And really, this is because we want to share what we're doing. So as we go through planning this very big project, we want to share our thinking around where some of these potential transmission routes might go. At this stage, we've got 3 options, and we are seeking feedback on that, both through individual landholder meetings as well as broader public comment. And more broadly, we're really interested not just in those land routes, but the project as a whole. What would you like us to know about important places for the region? What you'd like us to consider as we continue to plan this project? What might be the issues? What are the opportunities? So we do have a live consultation open at the moment. Just to give a plug to our channels, we have an online engagement website which is available at starofthesouth.com.au/get-involved, where you can drop some thoughts on a map, or ask a question or give us a survey response, which would be great. And we're also running things like Facebook Live, recognising that we can't be out there in the region running sessions, and always happy to take a phone call or an email. So key message is that we've got feedback open until the 17th of May, so another couple of weeks. We'd really love for you to follow us on Facebook at Star of the South Project, keep up to date with our planning, and please contribute to the development of this very important project. I think I've hit my 10 minutes.
Yes, indeed so. And thank you very much. And we know it was very hard to toss that into a 10-minute time period. I do have a question for you, but I will put those dates up, those links up a bit later on in the talk as well. There was a question in regard to marine and animal life and ensuring that the ecology of the area is protected through this. What is the consortium doing to make sure that things are proper in that regard?
Yeah, certainly. It's a very critical consideration for us, and it's one of the reasons that we have referred the project to the state and federal government so that we can get very clear guidelines around the scoping requirements as well as those assessments that we're doing. So what I would say is that all of our baseline research that we're doing at the moment, so bird surveys, working with groups such as BirdLife Australia and other locals, as well as, having professional marine mammal observers out there to actually understand what is the baseline in the area, and then what are the potential ways that we can either avoid those impacts, reduce them or minimise them through that very detailed process. And this is expected to take around 2 years. I will also point to the benefit of that offshore wind experience, and particularly our colleagues in the United States and the UK have significant experience in constructing these offshore wind farms and all of the mitigations and best practice that you can put in place to protect that marine life. So it'll be something that's ongoing. Obviously, we don't have all the answers right now, but please follow us to keep up to date with that planning, because we will be publishing those studies along the way.
Excellent. Well done, Erin. Look, there's some other questions, but I might leave them to the end, so we might say goodbye to you now as we move on to Peter Marriott in a tick. So, ladies and gentlemen, just to reiterate that, if you do have any questions, please go into our Q&A section at the bottom of the screen, and that allows you to ask a question, which then I can forward on. With 1,100 odd turbines in the North Sea, that's where Europe gets most of its energy, and it's exciting to see that we might have something similar here in Australia. A long way to go, and we do encourage you to go into those broader sessions to find out more details. Peter, you're next off the bat. You're looking at the DELBURN Wind Farm through AUSME Australia. We'll leave it to you, mate.
Thank you, Darren, for that kind invitation. Let me just try and share my screen. Rightio, so just a quick introduction. AUSME Australia has been proposing the DELBURN Wind Farm, or been working on the DELBURN Wind Farm project for a couple of years now. And so I'll just really, it's only a very quick presentation, and I can open up for as many questions as we can fit in. So I'll try and go through it. And I guess as a quick overview, for those that aren't aware of where we're proposing this, it's located just to the west of the Hazelwood open cut mine, straddling the Strzelecki Highway in between Morwell and Murboon North, covering the existing pine and some blue gum plantation that's managed by Hancock Victoria Plantations. The project has some planning complexity, that it straddles 3 local government areas, but that's something that we can deal with through the planning process. So the project that we're proposing at DELBURN is for a proposal of up to 33 wind turbines located onshore, with an overall nameplate capacity in the order of 180 to 200 megawatts, depending on which turbine we choose. And to sort of bring that into context with some of the other projects that are in the Gippsland region, the next biggest one would be Bald Hills at 52 turbines for 106 megawatts. So the newer technology that we're looking to deploy on the site gives a lot more value in terms of energy generation and nameplate capacity for the number of turbines that we can install. And obviously there's broader benefits that this brings in terms of CO2 emissions, and we're looking at the amount of power that this project should produce would be about 125,000 houses, Victorian residential houses powered per year. So it's a significant contribution to the state of Victoria's power generation. A little bit in terms of why we selected the Gippsland region. I guess Erin covered this quite well as well. So we were really looking at, there's an extensive amount of wind farms that are currently operating and proposed in the Western Victorian regions. And we're starting to see those become more and more constrained in terms of their ability to export power at the right times of day, and also being hit with large transmission losses. The network in that part of the grid really wasn't designed to hold large bulk generation of electricity. It was more there to distribute it to the load sources. So we saw an opportunity to explore what opportunities were in the Gippsland region. And it's a real balance between trying to find adequate wind resource, somewhere we can connect to the grid, where we don't have to build large grid extensions where possible. And then we've obviously got to have the right land that's available in freehold land. And the planning and environment framework has to allow for onshore wind development to go ahead. The other thing that's really been quite key to this development has been the increasing technology. So we're now looking at much larger wind turbines than we have previously, looking at tip heights up to 250 metres above ground level, and much larger rotor diameters that sit in the order of 50 to 70 metres above the ground level at their lowest point. So trees like forestry, plantation, timber really doesn't have a big impact on wind flow like what we've seen with some of the plantation wind farms in Europe that have been installed today. So a little bit in terms of the design itself, a big part of what we've acknowledged at DELBURN and really with the Gippsland region itself is there is a greater population density in this area, and we've really tried to find a site where we possibly can to minimise any impacts on near neighbours. And a big part of that has been designing the layout so that we can meet best practice noise compliance where possible. So in Victoria, the planning framework prescribes that we've got to meet 40 decibels or 5 decibels above background noise levels at neighbouring dwellings, and we've tried to design so that we achieve 35 decibels or less at all dwellings. Now, we can't quite achieve that at all, but we've done it all but less than a handful of houses. And the other thing that we've looked to build in as part of the forestry design is to use as many of the existing forestry roads as possible as part of our design of the actual wind farm, which then minimises impacts where we can environmentally. The other big part about this project is we are opening up the opportunity for a multifaceted sort of community benefit sharing project. So one of the big parts of this is we're allowing community members to directly invest financially in this project. So when we get to the point of getting closer to construction, we'll be opening up that opportunity for people to direct funds into the project as an investment and get an annual investment return from that. So that's something that's been really successfully done on the Sapphire Wind Farm up in New South Wales. And so we're looking to learn from that and I guess deploy that so it gives the opportunity for the Gippsland community to invest directly in renewables and get that commercial return. The other things that we're looking to do is a direct profit sharing arrangement with near neighbours. And that's in the order of about $500,000 a year that'll be going directly out to those near neighbours. And we're working with and we're establishing a community reference group to help us shape how that fund is to be distributed under a community trust model. So we're not going to try and impose a formula as such, but try and work with the community, understand their needs and try and put that in a really transparent way of distributing those funds out to the near neighbours on that real transparent basis. And then we've got a community development fund in the order of about $150,000 a year, which will be there to support local environmental and community initiatives directly surrounding the project site. So from a planning and environment point of view, we've undertaken all the detailed flora and fauna investigations and done most of the technical planning studies as well. We're just going through the final stages of tidying those up based on a recent change to the wind farm design, cutting it back from 35 turbines to 33. But what we've found is that we've only got 2 significant species at a federal level, being Strzelecki gum and growling grass frog, and we've been able to, Strzelecki gum completely avoid those impacts at all on that species, and we've got a very small level of impact on the growling grass frog and a very degraded bit of habitat. So we've gone through several iterations on our project layout design to try and minimise impacts where we can on both federal significant species and state significant species as well. But some of the other great things about this project site is that we have an existing commercial quarry smack bang in the middle of our project site, which can provide all the aggregates we need for both building roads and also concrete aggregates. And they're one of the big things in terms of shipping those into or transporting them into site can have some of the bigger impacts on the road network for public users around the site. So we see that as a great advantage in terms of this particular project location. And also, because the turbines are so large, you've got to be able to get these things on land transport into your project site. And so the access through the Latrobe Valley, which has really been built to facilitate access into the power stations, we get to leverage that to get our turbines into this site. And as turbines are getting bigger, those constraints in terms of land transport are becoming more and more of a problem when deciding where you can put these sites. So as Aaron had noted for Star of the South, we've recently referred this project to both the Minister for Planning under the Environmental Effects Act for an EES decision, and also to the Federal Minister for the EPBC Acts. And we're expecting some feedback from both of those in the coming month. The other, I guess, important part of a project that's an electrical generation project is where we're connecting into the grid. And so we're lucky that we've got existing transmission infrastructure on our project site that we can plug directly into. So that involves us building a new terminal station. We've decided that site just on the northern edge of the project area. And a big advantage of this is that we don't need to build new overhead power lines to connect our electricity to the grid. Obviously, the network now has more than adequate capacity for our project size, which is great. So we've got unconstrained generation, but also we're allowing, as part of our development envelope, to put a battery co-located with our terminal station so that if it's needed, then we can build that as part of our proposal. A little bit on the wind resource itself. So we've been monitoring on site since the start of 2019 using a LiDAR unit, which is a remote sensing unit, and we've also installed a 160-metre met mast. And so what we've found is that we've got a really predominant east and west wind regime. And as Aaron was noting about the Star of the South, what we see particular about the Gippsland region is it gets a very strong easterly influence when Western Victoria receives very little wind on hot days. And so that's really important about diversifying the wind generation across the whole of the state of Victoria. And so the DELBURN site in the Latrobe Valley area really does still experience that. Even though we're not a coastal site, you very much get that easterly influence that the majority of the Victorian wind fleet don't experience. So we've got a wind resource in the order of about 7.2 metres per second in terms of long term, which is good for particularly for the new big rotor turbines that we're proposing. And we're producing in the order of about 560 to 650 gigawatt hours per year. In terms of our community engagement, so we launched early last year and have employed a couple of local people from the surrounding community to be our local community engagement advisors and forming part of the OSME team. We've also established a project office and shop front in the township of Ballara that's pictured there. And that's manned on a more regular basis now than it was at the start as we were gearing up. Obviously not at the moment with the current restrictions, but as soon as those are lifted, we look forward to seeing more and more people drop in and hear more about the project. We're also very active on social media. So we're trying to open ourselves up to as many different channels for people to engage with us and hear about the project and also hear the concerns back from the local community. So we're holding as many of these community open days as we can, and we'll also continue to run some tours to the nearby Bald Hills Wind Farm. Just if anyone hasn't had that experience of seeing and being near an operating wind farm, then we can give that first-hand experience. Just lastly, before I close out, I'll just run through some of the sort of key community issues. So what we've really been hearing back from the community is concerns around noise, infrasound and health, which is an ongoing thing with wind farms in Victoria. There's a couple of matters that are before the courts relating to the Bald Hills Wind Farm. We're closely monitoring those, but we're also very confident in terms of where the regulation for wind farms sit and our allowable noise levels and what that means for amenity for near neighbours. But a big part of what we've done as part of the development process for DELBURN is to provide an independent peer reviewer for the noise process and open that up to the community should they wish to use that independent consultant to act as a technical advisor for the community and for us. And we've obviously also got to get an EPA audited noise review before we can submit for a planning approval. So there's 2 separate layers of independent review on all of our noise assessments to make sure that they're done thoroughly and robustly in accordance with the standards. We've also heard concerns about bushfire risk, and we've worked really closely with our bushfire consultants around addressing those in terms of clearances around the base of the turbines to manage fuel risk. and also looking at things like aerial bombardment and any impacts on that. The conclusions of that are that the presence of a wind farm in the forest doesn't increase the risk of the existing fire risk that's within that forest, and the risks to our wind farm infrastructure are clearly manageable with some mitigation measures which we'll put in as part of the design. The other one we're hearing back from communities, impacts on property values. That's something that we're clearly working on. We're trying to get some more transparent information around property values near wind farms, because wind farms have been operating in Victoria for over 20 years now. In that real Victorian context around farming properties, lifestyle blocks, the evidence that we've seen so far is that we don't see those property value impacts around wind farms materialising, but it's something that we're working to get more and more transparent information out there for the community to digest. And just lastly, because I know we're running out of time, just to quickly go through the project timeline. So where we've been so far over the course of the last 2.5 years is really going through that site selection, early feasibility, and now into a community engagement process as we're designing the project. We're looking to lodge a formal planning approval sometime in the middle of this year, around June and July. It depends a little bit on the timing of finalising some of the technical studies. And then moving through into 2021, we're looking to go through the final sort of detailed design of the project, financing, pre-construction compliance assessments to enable us to move into construction sometime in 2022. So we're still some way off realising this project, but obviously we're still working as quickly as we can to move through that process. So I think I'll leave it there, Darren, and open up to questions that anyone may have.
Thank you very much. And look, I recognise there's a stack of questions there, and of course, all of your questions will be answered. We'll pass them on at the end of them, and there will be links to those. Look, there's a few on community engagement. Some people asking about how particularly local people can be involved in that community engagement. Can you just kind of reiterate that again, how they can be on the panel or be involved in all that?
Yeah, sure. So obviously we've got our 2 local people that are always available to meet locals in their homes. They can come and visit us in our in our project office. We're going to set up a community reference group, so we're asking for people to and we will continue to do so, to nominate to be part of that group, so they can help give feedback on the project and also be that conduit back to the community around updates that we've got. So there's lots of different avenues. We ask people to register on social media, get updates in terms of our e-news. So there's lots of channels you can do that, either through our website or through social media, or reach out to myself, Ruth, or Liz and register. And we're really keen to talk to as many people as we can.
There was a question in regard, there's specific questions in regard to the gums and so on, but there was also one about the CFA, which I think I might mention. Talking about, have you received a position from the CFA on the risk in their aerial response to fires, and what's the CFA's position? There was some discussion about fire risk. Do you want to? Sure.
Yeah. So we've been engaging very closely with the CFA. The CFA's position on wind farms generally is that they do not impede aerial firefighting, and the location within a plantation does not change that. The bigger turbines means that need to be spaced much further apart. So our inter-turbine spacings are somewhere between 700 metres and 1,000 metres, which gives really adequate clearance for moving aircraft through to undertake any aerial bombardment should conditions be allowable for them to do that. And otherwise, the mitigation measures that we're looking to implement through increased fire breaks throughout the plantation, extra clearances that we need to do around the wind turbine, static water supplies, all of those things ultimately lead that the net risk of the net fire risk in that plantation with a wind farm there is not increased without, compared to our presence not being there.
Just one more very quickly. The person did ask about the battery that you have, and asking whether the battery storage is required for grid stability, or is it more a commercial decision such that you can store energy and then feed it to the grid?
Yeah, sure.
At a time.
Yeah, so look, we don't need it for grid stability in this part of the grid. Our short circuit ratio and our stability in this part of the network is very, very high compared to parts of Western Victoria, where we're seeing more ancillary grid infrastructure being installed. Really what we're allowing it there for is a commercial proposition around storage, providing firming capacity to the intermittent wind generation. And should that be needed for us to secure offtake and selling that power to a customer, then we've got that facilitated in the development envelope. So it's unsure whether we'll proceed with it or not at this stage, but we're allowing for it should that commercial proposition realise.
And then just to finish this off, so looking at timelines for this, so people need to get engaged. What are you suggesting? You suggest there's an EES going on. So what are we looking like? What are we looking for?
Yeah, so we've got over the course of the next month to 6 weeks, we're expecting feedback from both the state and federal governments with regards to the approval pathways, whether we need to go through an EES or a formal planning process, and also whether it's a controlled action under the EPBC Act. So those ones will go through. Then we'll quickly proceed through what we expect it to be a planning process rather than an EES. And we ask all local community members, people in the region that want to find out more, get in touch with us so we can give you more information about the project. We're trying to keep the website up to date as much as we can in terms of as soon as results of the technical studies are available, we're publishing those so they're transparently available for people to look at. And obviously we're here to help digest that information and explain what it means.
Excellent. Peter, I'll leave you there. I know there's a number of questions, and I'm sure if you can get on the Q&A and maybe answer some of those for individual people. Otherwise, I thank you very much for coming today. Thank you, Peter and DELBURN. Wonderful. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, also for the people and all the questions coming in. I'm sorry we can't get to all of them. I do stress again that we will have links on the website, and we will be passing those on and hopefully get the answers back to you. We will also give links at the end at which people can follow up some questions with the various people. We now move over to King Arthur, who's the Solaris RE, which is a really exciting project for Gippsland. I will stress that while we've picked these 3 out today, there's a number of other exciting projects going on, but the scope of the 3 that you're looking at today really are the big ones, and what King Arthur's got planned at Solaris is absolutely fascinating. So King, we'll leave it to you, mate. Away you go.
Great, thanks, Darren. Okay, so I'll open up my share screen for starters. Okay, and okay, right. Okay, so Gippsland Renewable Energy Project. So basically, Solaris RE was invited into the sale area by some local members of the community, Brett Singh, who runs Marathon Electrical, and also Wayne and Anne Ferguson, who run Ferguson Civils. And were brought in initially because of power issues which they've had between Sale and Bairnsdale in particular, in terms of grid issues, in terms of voltage. A number of the larger businesses in the area were stating that it was difficult to expand their operations because of the unreliability of the power. So basically from there we spoke with the managing director of AusNet and the local AusNet team just to get confirmation of what the issues were. And they said, yes, there is issues there. So backing up what Erin and Peter said earlier, fantastic network from, the Morwell, Hazelwood, Loy Yang areas out until you get up to about Sale. But from there outwards, the network can be a bit flaky. So the first project which we're looking at is what we're calling Project Perry Bridge. And that's on one of the transmission lines there, 66 kV line. It's low-grade agricultural land. And really we're doing that project to address those voltage issues. So that was the first thing, was to basically address some problems which have been identified. We've got 2 other projects as well. We've got Project Fulham, which is on another 66 kV line. And then we've got the large project, which is featured in the Gippy Times front page a few times. That's the large project, Gippsland Renewable Energy Park, which is 5,800 acres of low-grade agricultural land. And you can see really that's the site where the Basslink transitions from the underground cable to overhead, goes right through the middle of our Gippsland Renewable Energy Park. We've also got some additional land, another 900 acres, which we're calling Project Omega. That's the site of the old communications base down at the Omega site, which we've got that available if required as well. Okay, so we talk about Project Perry Bridge. So this is, as I said, the first project. We're pretty close to having that ready to commence. It's on 232 acres, it's 44 megawatts of solar farm. So 44 megawatts of solar farm is basically, in today's language, about 100,000 panels, and up to 50 megawatts hours of battery. And as we said, we've got the existing 66 kV line there. So this project is going to cost around $125 million. We're expecting it to be shovel ready, as I said, by October this year. And our planning approvals and connection agreements are all well advanced. There's been some slowdown with the COVID issues, but we're still confident of completing the process by October. Basically, we're looking at also, there's an existing gas peaker out at Bairnsdale, and with our farm being positioned on that 66 kV line between Sale and Bairnsdale, there's an opportunity for us to either complement or replace some of that gas peaker output with cheaper green energy.
Sorry to bother you there, King.
Yep.
Maybe can you put the display into presentation mode? Some of the people online are telling me that it's a bit hard to read in the mode.
No problem.
Sorry to cut you off there, mate.
That's right. Is that better?
Far better. Thank you so much.
Yep, no problem. Good. Okay. So let me see. So we've so we've also, one of the major things which we wanted to address was providing cheaper power for the regional businesses. So if you're going to have a solar farm in your community, we want to make sure that the local businesses, local community can access that power. So we've got starting some relationships with green energy companies that can sell the power from this solar farm directly to the local community and local businesses. So that corporate power purchase agreements, corporate PPAs is the language that's used. It's basically just a long-term contract for businesses whereby they can lock in the price of green energy for 5 to 10 years, sometimes longer, and take advantage of having that generation in their community. And as I said, also we'll have the retail offering for local area residents to use as well, to have access to lower power prices. Right, so the actual Perry Bridge project, which is, as I said, just in the final sign-off stages now with the engineers, it's going to use what's known as a single access array system. Basically what that means is that the panels will track the sun, which maximises the output. And also we're looking at the use of either bifacial modules, which means you get the reflection off the ground, which hits the backside of the module and increases the efficiency. And there's also, just recently, even since this presentation was put together, the opportunity for some new technology out of America, which is thin film solar panels, which give a higher efficiency rating and are also more environmentally friendly. So Perry Bridge will be the first project to hit the ground, and we're hoping to turn the soil later this year. If we go to the next slide, which is the Fulham project. So this is a second site in the area, which is 400 acres. We're looking to put 65 megawatts of solar on that site, plus a up to 65 megawatt hour battery. And that's also got an existing 66 kV line, which we can connect into. You can see the project cost there is around 165 mil. And that one we're expecting to be at that shovel ready stage probably in about June of next year. I should have mentioned actually with the last project, with the Perry Bridge, that's probably going to create between 60 to 80 jobs for locals, pretty straight up. This Fulham project will be, being a bit bigger project, will probably get around 120 to 140 jobs for local contractors. So this one we're leveraging off the work which we're undertaking for Perry Bridge. So we've got the same consultants that are doing all the bushfire assessments, the flora and fauna, agricultural value, etc. All those guys that are mainly local consultants to the area understand the requirements of the local stakeholders. This one is also on low-grade sheep grazing land. So that's the second project, middle of next year. Now the large project, which is the one which is featured in the Gippsland Times, that project is a renewable energy park. So the difference there is that in addition to the solar and the batteries, we're also looking at other types of technologies to put onto that park. So we've been approached by a couple of wind farm developers who are interested in putting some onshore wind there. We've been in discussions with some parties in terms of green hydrogen being produced on the plant. Also thermal solar, which utilises water in conjunction with the panels and stores the energy in the heated water. Also potential for a gas peaker station, because we've got Longford gas terminal not that far away and gas pipelines running through the site. The other big issue with this site is that we've had support from AusNet, who basically own the infrastructure for the eastern part of Victoria. They're putting a proposal to build a transmission line, a large capacity transmission line out to this site, which will be 2 by 500 kV lines, which is quite significant infrastructure build. And we're looking at that proposal now. Now, if that goes ahead, then that'll speed up the progress of this project quite significantly. As it stands, it's about $1.2 billion for the solar and the battery stage. And with the indications we've had from the wind companies, there'll be about another 600 million worth of wind, which could go in. This project will be shovel ready for the solar and battery stage by 2023. And then the wind could happen within 12 months after that, could possibly happen concurrently. Right, so in terms of the highlights for the project, I'll just skip through with this because Aaron and Peter have basically identified the same positives. So in terms of a great location, the fact that we do have a great transmission network in the area which we'll be utilising, and that marginal loss factor, which has been a big drag on a lot of other renewable projects in the northeast and in the northwest and the west of Victoria. We don't have that issue. So those projects have got a marginal loss factor of around 80%. Ours is up at 99.3. What that means in simple language is every dollar of power you generate, we get to keep 99.3 of it, whereas those other projects are losing up to 20% of their revenue due to transmission losses. The other issue, why it's been excellent working on these projects, is the support that we've received from the Wellington Shire Council, local Indigenous community, because some of our property is got Indigenous overlays. They've been extremely supportive. The local environmental groups, such as the one which is sponsoring this discussion today, has been excellent. The other big plus is the skilled workforce. I worked in Morwell myself for 8 years, so I understand the energy workforce which we have, which has been fantastic. Also, the other big highlight for the project, as I mentioned in the last slide, is combining different power sources. So renewable energy parks are fairly new in Australia. There's not many that go beyond 1 or 2 different types of technology. So we'll definitely have the solar plus the batteries plus the wind, and the potential for others such as hydrogen, thermal solar, etc. And there's also the opportunity for other projects to share in that infrastructure and the transmission resources, which we spoke about. The timing also, so we're able to move quite quickly to get these projects up. So the first project later this year, second project next year, and then the large renewable energy park basically the year after that.
We might have to draw you to a bit of a close there. Is there anything you just specifically need to mention before we move on?
No, not really. So I was just going to say the only other big thing is with the large project, we're looking at around 1,200 full-time positions. And that project, because of the various technologies, will be about a 5-year build. So, yeah, and that's pretty much it.
I'm really sorry to push you along there because I know it's a very exciting project. Just a couple of questions. People have asked a bit, firstly, about the Ferry Bridge project. I know Paula was asking about that's the first one coming up. Environmental protection seem to be a key issue today. People have been asking about those. What are you doing at the Ferry Bridge site? How's that going through? How can we be sure that the environmental protections are being looked after?
Yeah, absolutely. So really the major cost, if you like, of doing these types of projects is the planning process. So we've got a small army of environmental consultants that have been working with us, which, you know, our foundation investors have put all the money into get all that work done. We're dealing with an international group called Ricardo's. They're one of the world leaders in terms of environmental consulting, and they're contracting work out to local consultants in the area who have been doing the flora and fauna, been doing the bushfire assessments, basically everything which we need to do, glint and glare, etc. All of those studies have been completed. We've adjusted the site layout accordingly to make sure we protect Indigenous grasses to the area, protecting some of the larger trees which are in the area. And yeah, that's foremost. And the fact that we've got the overlay with the Indigenous community as well, we've had them on site a number of times to do their surveys as well.
So you are working those as part of the permitting process by the sound of it.
Absolutely.
There was a question in regard, and I know Ryan asked this about grazing land. Wellington Shire has some wonderful farming land. I think that's the answer to that in regard to, you mentioned shared grazing land before. Can you just maybe reiterate what are you doing in regard to, you know, agricultural land and renewable energy?
Yeah, so that's one of our key principles which we work to, is it has to be low grade agricultural land for us to put a solar farm or anything else onto it. So part of that planning process is to get a agricultural land value assessment done. So the assessment for Ferry Bridge has it at about 1/5 of the value of what it needs to be considered viable agricultural land. So it's not irrigated at all, and it doesn't have any cropping on it. There is the potential going forward that it could have sheep grazing beneath the panels, and we're designing it as such that we can have some sheep grazing. But the actual land which we've identified is poor quality land. We're not looking to take any good grazing land at all.
Good. All right. Well, I might welcome the other panellists back because to do some general questions between the two. So if I can ask Peter and Erin to show their faces. Hello, Erin. And again, hello. And again, King, thank you very much for your presentation. I will say we had a few people comment on how wonderful your name is. So thank you for that.
That's never happened before.
A couple of questions for all of you. For Star of the South first, there was some questions in regard to batteries, the battery storage. Are you considering any sorts of battery storage?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's not something that we've ruled in or out at this stage. So we are looking at it. What I'd say is it'd have to be a very, very big battery for all the power that we would generate. But certainly it's something that we're looking at. Equally with other projects that are happening, you know, in terms of other storage opportunities. So it's an important consideration for us because we believe there'll be a lot of offshore wind power, and it would be good to capture that if it's not all being used at that time.
Excellent. Coming up, please. This is just, you might see on the screen now, the tax of the DELBURN Wind Farm and the GIPPSLAND Renewable Energy Park. We absolutely appreciate. We've really only just given you a very small part of where they're all going. This is the first series of webinars that are coming up over the next 6 weeks. Next week, we have looking at local community energy hubs. We're going to have a talk to the Latrobe Valley Community Power Hub, talk about some of the exciting things they're doing in Yanar, other areas, Centenary House. Then look at Nicola and what Nicola did as an off-grid project, how they excitingly transformed their town. And then we go to Wonthaggi and see what the Energy Innovation Co-op's doing and the Wonthaggi Coal Mine Project and others. Then over the next few weeks, we're going to look at town models where towns like Mooba North and French Island, Phillip and in the Hayfield, which are doing some really exciting things, a township model. Then we're looking at some financing solutions. I know Morag will be hosting that one there and talking a little bit about financing your community ideas. We're then moving to sporting clubs where if your tennis club or footy club's got a bit of an idea, we should be able to present that to you. We'll see over the next few weeks. We hope to see you. Please register for our next one. It was really exciting to see so many here today. I'd again like to thank our sponsors, DELP, LVA for the GIPPSLAND climate change work, and even groups like the Sustainability Network. Thank you for getting on board for today. And also Latrobe and Wellington. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being part of this discussion about a renewable future for Gippsland. I hope it's given you some optimism that there are people out there doing some exciting things. This week was the big boys. Next week, we're going to go more into a community model and see what that's happening. On behalf of us all, of Esther, myself, support work, myself, thank you very much for being part of it, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you. Good afternoon.